Well, it's just gone 2 o'clock. So a warm welcome to you all to this this World Goodwill and CANA joint seminar on what is the way of love. And so we're going to have a joint exploration of goodwill and compassion from both Christian and esoteric perspectives. So yes, a very warm welcome, and particular warm welcome to Steve Nation and Christine Morgan from World Goodwill and the Lucis Trust, who are going to be speaking. Just in case, we will make sure everybody's muted when there is somebody speaking. So when it comes to a stage where there is an opportunity to speak, then please do unmute yourselves in order to speak, and we'll say more about that later. We'll be having a short alignment in a few minutes, and then Christine's going to speak about World Goodwill, followed by a meditation. And then I myself will speak about the way of love from the CANA perspective. And Jane Upchurch will also say a few words about the way of love from a slightly more ecological perspective, I suppose. We're going to have a break in the middle, 20-minute break, so don't panic. But of course, if anybody needs to attend to something or whatever, then please just make sure you're muted and put your screen off and disappear.
Could you mention the chat, Don?
Yes, the chat is operational. So if you want to put comments in the chat, please do. And when it comes to the breakout rooms, I will try and put the questions, the focus questions, in the chat as well, so that they're available, because you don't have access to anything that's screen shared during the breakout rooms. And we have a plenary towards the end as well, and Steve will be addressing us as well, and a final intention right at the end. So we're going to make a start by having a short alignment, and I'm hoping Janice is with us. Yes, you are, Janice. I can see that. So, Janice, over to you for our short alignment now.
Thank you. Well, welcome everybody from me. It's an appropriate time to be meeting on goodwill with all the conflict going on in the Middle East, which I'm sure we all have very much in mind. So let's remember the golden rule that's in all the faith traditions of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And as we align with each other in love and deep connection, let's ask for blessing on ourselves as we deliberate today, and on all in the Middle East, in a moment or two of silence, which I will end after a minute. So as we send love and light around the world, and especially to the Middle East, let us remember and ask for blessing on all who need goodwill today, and pick up our role in sharing it more widely. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. It'd be helpful, I think, probably for viewing, if you switch to the speaker view, so that when the speaker is speaking, that is the person that you're seeing, because otherwise we have many pages of people on the gallery view. So if you switch yourselves to speaker view, which is in the view category, top right hand corner on my screen, maybe different on other appliances which you're working. So I was going to start with just a short introduction to what is CANA, because some of you belong to CANA for some years, some of you have belonged to World Goodwill for many years, and so the one half doesn't know much about the other half. So I'm going to say a few words about CANA. Find the right thing. Yes, CANA, Christians Awakening to New Age. The last 32 years, I think it is, CANA has been exploring the journey of awakening to a new understanding of the original teachings of Jesus. Is my face coming up on the screen for people? It is? Okay, that's fine. It's not for me.
It's confusing because you can't see yourself. I know that threw me last time I did it.
Okay, so yeah, CANA has been going about 32 years, and I suppose the idea of it arose from the 1960s, the sort of countercultural uprising, when the New Age emerged, and the New Age teachings embraced a lot of the ageless wisdom teachings from Blavatsky and Alice Bailey and many others. And it brought this sense of the divine within everything. And then through the 70s, this movement grew. It attracted a lot of people from religious background, despite a lot of criticism by the institutions and its leaders. In 1973, a group called the Bridge Trust formed with the idea of creating a bridge between Christianity and the growing New Age teachings that were seen as a crucial contribution to further spiritual understanding. Exposure to those new ideas had caused a lot of people to re-examine their Christian beliefs. Sorry, I just got interrupted by a dog. There we are. These things happen. But the Bridge Trust's central features were developing spiritual awareness, plus they looked into organic farming and holistic education. Now, the trust itself closed in the late 1980s, but there was a group that remained within it with a particular interest in the new consciousness in Christianity, and they continued meeting, holding several reflective events. And then in 1991, they put on a couple of events called Christians Awakening to a New Age. And it was apparent that it was a great relief for many others who were similarly expanding their understanding of Christianity. And so Christians Awakening to the New Age was formed. And then later, as the New Age term fell a bit out of fashion, the name was changed to Christians Awakening to New Awareness. Now, in subsequent years of conferences and retreats and sharing meetings, they were held all around the country, and our numbers grew. In 2001, we published a book, A New Framework for Christian Belief, and that was followed by a number of study papers, and then another book, Awakening to New Awareness, Stories of Contemporary Christians, in which many of us explained how we'd got to where our understanding was at that time. We're now updating that version to something called Voices of Contemporary Christians Towards the Universal. So CANA is really a network of people responding to the new impulse of spirit at this time. It seems to us that science and planetary-wide connections and the mystical and the wisdom traditions are all converging to bring us a recognition of our essential unity within this rich diversity and the underpinning of love as the basis for all life. We are exploring this spiritual path from our roots in Christianity and the resonance with the teachings of Jesus as a path of transformation. We found that since COVID and the introduction of online meetings in Zoom, we've now got a lot more supporters who receive our mailings. But it's only a very small group of us, a small core group, that provide the sort of organisation for CANA. But our hope is to rediscover and reimagine a path leading towards a more universal spirituality that can operate with respect for all living creatures, a path of love and service for the betterment of all. Excuse me. But it's not just about transformation of the individual, but the global shift of humanity to a higher way of being. And that's what Jesus termed the realm of God, or the kingdom of God. Many of us within CANA have studied the ageless wisdom teachings as well, and seek to reinterpret theology along those more universal lines. Our website is simply cana.org.uk, and anyone's welcome to have a look. But as we've seen in this last few weeks, we live in complex and challenging times. And the evolutionary pulse of spirit is bringing the realization that many of our old forms and old ways of being are no longer suited and really have to evolve or be left behind. Present day institutions are no longer serving us. And our own inner calling and a growing number of contemporary teachers are urging us to take up our role as caretakers of this beautiful planet, of each and all forms of the one life, a collective task to work together to restore and rejuvenate and bring into being a new era for humanity. At a more esoteric level, many of us recognize the signs of an incoming Aquarian age, and hence our joint seminar this afternoon on the way of love with World Goodwill, an outreach part of the Lucis Trust, which is based on the writings of Alice Bailey under the teaching of Dwal Kul, the master. So what do we offer in CANA? Well, we offer conscious conversations held on Zoom about 3 times a year, where we have a speaker and then breakout rooms. Recent topics have been transformative love, Christianity expanding into a universal spirituality, our life and death as 2 great adventures, deep ecological thinking, divine feminine and Christianity, energies, angels and elementals, morphic resonance, green spirituality, covering a wide range of interesting topics. And then we also have CANA's online sacred space, which is a spoken liturgy held on Zoom 4 times a year, an opportunity to engage with spirit and our own divine center communally. We now use this to celebrate the cross-quarter festivals of Imbolc, Beltane, Lunasa and Samhain, and our November Samhain meeting is coming up fairly soon. We publish an e-letter on different topics 3 times a year, sent by email or paper, and back copies of that are on our website. We also link together every full moon to build a pathway to a more universal spirituality, aware of the particular energies at that time. And every new moon, we have a focus on praying for the planet in prayer and meditation and awareness, with love, hope, and gratitude for the future. And we also host occasional events as well. But that's CANA. That's us. We've been going for some time. We're only a small organisation, nothing like the worldwide reach of the Lucis Trust, but it's lovely to be able to share with the Lucis Trust and World Goodwill today for this seminar. So thank you for listening to my little bit about CANA. And now Christine, I think, is going to talk about what is World Goodwill.
Well, thank you, Don. I'd like to begin by saying how good it is to meet up with you through the ethers in this way and to be part of this shared meeting. It surely is a demonstration of goodwill, of love in action, as we often say. And I bring good wishes too from all of us at the Lucis Trust and World Goodwill. As Don said, we're going to say a few words about World Goodwill. And goodwill is one of those words which is so familiar to us, but it hides a tremendous force for good. Its energy is spiritually contagious, a touchstone that can transform the world. Goodwill has also been described as the maximum amount of love that humanity is able to demonstrate at this time. So this includes the many acts of goodwill that we see, for instance, in acts of charity and in every walk of life. But it is more than this, for one of the effects of goodwill is that it exposes opposing views and cleavages, shining the clear light of goodwill upon them. It raises any problem or challenge to a higher level of consciousness and inclusiveness, where harmony and resolution can be found. So this deliberate use of goodwill resonates with Christ's words when he said, "I come bearing a sword." His aim was to cut through the dross, to draw a clear line between right and wrong so that choice could be made. And goodwill emanates from humanity, therefore, as intelligent love applied with discrimination. And despite the ongoing crises and conflicts that we see continually on our screens, we know that the heart of humanity is sound. The basis of this is reflected in the words of Liu Chu, the Chinese philosopher of long ago, who said, "When you extend goodwill in every direction, regardless of circumstances, you begin to see that we are all one." So the words, regardless of circumstances, are important, for they contain the idea of moving on, relentlessly pushing forward towards the goal of unity, regardless of obstacles. Good and will are the fiery components of goodwill, often evident in speeches by statesmen. And Winston Churchill is a good example of this, when he said, "In war, resolution; in defeat, defiance; in victory, magnanimity; in peace, goodwill." In peace, goodwill. His perspective acknowledges the creative tension of the goodwill needed to achieve and sustain right human relations. And this also hints at a higher counterpart to goodwill, the will to good. And every demonstration of group consciousness and service, which is motivated by good, is capable of withstanding and expressing this dynamic energy. And such is its power that it's best received and safely distributed only from the soul's group conscious unity, where love prevails. So as Janice alluded to, as the news this week bears testimony to, the task of bringing peace to all of humanity remains a monumental challenge. But goodwill is persistent, and where it is demonstrated, need will inevitably be met, for the source of goodwill is limitless. Of course, it's not always met in a way which is necessarily wanted or expected or even understood. But humanity is being challenged to change its attitudes, as well as to act in faith that whenever and wherever goodwill is present, we will surely onward move in life step by step, closer towards the goal. In other words, it awakens the loving intention to fire the entire world with the spirit of relationship, as Alice Bailey once noted. As far as World Goodwill, the organization, is concerned, its role is educational, conveying some of the ideas and concepts for a new civilization and culture. It was set up in 1932 as a service activity of the Lucis Trust, and it is an NGO. Its co-workers and units of service around the world are encouraged to think deeply and creatively about world problems. It offers a course on the problems of humanity, which draws on spiritual principles. Its newsletters highlight goodwill in the world and drawing on contemporary themes, which are published and translated in all the main European languages and distributed worldwide. World Goodwill also has a blog which is regularly updated in support of important meetings and developments at the UN and the world at large. So it was set up originally to help anchor these spiritual concepts and principles in the consciousness of humanity. And the energy of goodwill is being expressed by many servers these days. And it is an incredible fact that there are now over 10 million NGOs in the world. The ideas of creative thinkers in every field of human endeavor and in spirituality generally are a source of great inspiration and hope. However, I think it's also true that there's often a lack of awareness of the lighted purpose and love which underlie the outer world. And World Goodwill expresses the belief that there exists a great planetary center of love, at the center of which stands the Christ, the world teacher, carrying out the great plan of divinity. And World Goodwill strives to align itself with this plan and these lives in service to humanity, which is through the application of goodwill in thought and deed that the consciousness of others can become sensitive to this plan too. A special goodwill meditation is available for general use and forms part of the monthly hour-long webinar held on the last Wednesday of the month, which is open to all. In fact, the next one is on Wednesday, on Wednesday, with a theme, A World Without Fear. It also holds an annual seminar on contemporary themes, which this year is broadcast on the 11th of November, and it will focus on human responsibility in an age of transformation, forging a moral direction in science and technology. So many goodwill groups also hold meditations when spiritual energies are at their peak near the time of the full moon And as we've heard, this is a practice which CANA also advocates. Many of you may know the great invocation, which is intended as a prayer for all humanity. And using it steadily with understanding nurtures inclusiveness. The light and the love that it evokes enhances consciousness of the divine plan and the will to good which is needed to establish better human relations. So today it seems that the heightened level of spiritual energy on the planet is too much for some. And while it's stimulating the evolution of human consciousness towards this more selfless and loving state, it is also stirring up lower desires and fears, glamours and delusions in others. But all this upheaval helps to awaken us and humanity to the choices it must make between right and wrong, and throw itself on the side of spiritual evolution. I mean, the fact that there is such a thing as spiritual evolution and continuity of life, of knowledge and service, the fact there is a great center of love and purpose that stands behind the scenes, isn't an easy concept to bring to a suffering humanity in the modern world. So as we go into meditation now, it's good to bear in mind that goodwill is a magnetic power that people respond to, whatever their beliefs, even if they have none. And goodwill doesn't grow through busyness or overthinking, but by the inherent life or spirit in which each demonstration of goodwill is enacted. So let us go now into meditation, realizing that essentially we are souls, and as such have telepathic rapport with all souls, that energy follows thought, and that this meditation on goodwill is not a passive form of devotion so much as a positive, creative use of the mind, actively linking the inner and outer worlds. I'll say the stages as we go along, and we will sound the sacred word 3 times at the end. Link up in thought with all who are working with this goodwill meditation. Reflect upon the fact of relationship. You're related to your family, your community, your nation, the world of nations, the one humanity made up of all races and nations. using the mantra of unification now. The souls of all are one, and I am one with them. I seek to love, not hate. I seek to serve and not exact due service. I seek to heal, not hurt. Let pain bring due reward of light and love. Let the soul control the outer form and life and all events, and bring to light the love that underlies the happenings of the time. Let vision come and insight. Let the future stand revealed. Let inner union demonstrate, and outer cleavages be gone. Let love prevail. Let all people love. Reflect upon your own and humanity's relationship with all beings who dwell in the higher realms of mind and heart. The spiritual hierarchy of saints, rishis, bodhisattvas, and adepts, honored by the world's religions and spiritual groups. Imagine you are standing together within the center of the spiritual hierarchy, immersed in the consciousness of the heart of love. For some, this heart of love is known as the Christ. Other faiths have other names for the one at the center, such as Maitreya, the Imam Mahdi, and the Kalki Avatar. Maintaining this high point of contact, let your thoughts reach out to include all members of the human family in whom the energy of goodwill is active. We use the affirmation of love. In the center of all love I stand. From that center I, the soul, will outward move. From that center I, the one who serves, will work. May the love of the divine self be shed abroad in my heart, through my group, and throughout the world. Visualize the energy of love flowing from the spiritual hierarchy through men and women of goodwill into the hearts and minds of all people, infusing them with goodwill and creating loving and harmonious relationships. Meditate on ways of spreading goodwill, creating right human relationships, and restoring peace on earth. Realize that you're helping to build a channel between the spiritual hierarchy and humanity, through which the energy of goodwill may flow, uniting humanity, helping to solve its problems and to heal all differences and cleavages. Linked in thought with people of goodwill all over the world, we'll say the great invocation, the adapted version. and we'll say it with deliberation and full commitment to its meaning, knowing that we are radiating its potent energies to humanity. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into human minds. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into human hearts. May the coming one return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide all little human wills, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the human race, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you very much for leading us in that meditation. That's goodwill. Reaches out across the world. We now come to a little bit of input, which is really addressing the title of the seminar today, What is the Way of Love? And it's up to me to start this off, and Jane Upchurch is going to continue after my section. And many of you know I was or still am a Christian priest, and was in full-time ministry for years. And in Christianity, there's a lot of teaching about love, focusing primarily on the words of Jesus, to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself, and his command to love one another as I have loved you. And then even the hard one, to love your enemy. And this, over 2,000 years has given rise to the realization within Christian doctrine that God is love, that love is the core message of Jesus, and that, of course, it's a much bigger thing than any feeling or sentiment. It's an altruistic, unconditional love towards all beings, towards all life, towards all creation. And the outworking of that inner attitude of unconditionality is an attitude of goodwill towards all other beings. To my mind, Christianity is about the transformation of the human nature to develop this inner attitude of unconditional love. This isn't simply to accept wrongdoing and the expressions of the lower nature that lead to so much suffering in the world today, but it is to view every situation with compassion, not to blame. It's about seeking to understand how it has arisen and to work towards the best outcome for the evolution of Christianity. Now, some years ago, I tried to put this into context for church teaching, because the creeds, the big creeds of the church, they tell you what to believe. They're a statement of what you should have in your mind about how you believe in Jesus, how you believe in God, how you believe in the Holy Spirit. There's nothing about how we should behave. And so I developed this statement, and I'm going to share it on screen, if I may, which enabled us to focus more, I think, on what it is that we are trying to do to change our way of thinking. Let's find this and share it with you. I called it the Christian way. And it said, Christians are called in God's strength and love and following the example of Christ Jesus to walk in the light, which means to love and care for one another, not to ignore or be indifferent or to hate. So I put in the opposites each time so that it draws that perspective. To be generous with each other, to look after those in need, not to be selfish, uncaring, or hard of heart. To forgive each other, not to harbour grudges, or bitterness, or resentment. To live in peace and harmony, not to look for conflict, or seek violence, revenge, and retribution. To live honest, truthful lives, having integrity in our daily living, not to cheat, not to tread on others, not to stab in the back. To seek justice for others, to speak out, to challenge unfair systems, not to hide our heads in the sand. To be stewards of God's creation, to tread the earth lightly, caring for the biosphere in which we exist, to heal and make whole, to work for a better world in which to live, to be joyful, to show gratitude, and to rejoice in life and in God, and to work on the inner spiritual life in order to evolve as human beings. This is the way of Christ, the way of the kingdom of God, of which Jesus spoke so often. Now that is love at a personal level, and that is what I was trying to encourage in people in the churches that I served. But I actually see love in a much bigger context as well. Whilst that was guidelines for church congregations, and I suppose those guidelines probably apply to all other religions as well. But whilst those are just how we should behave in our lives, how we, the best way of behaving, I see love as actually the divine power that creates. I see love in a much bigger context as the driver for evolution. The way I see it, love is a universal quality of bringing things into relationship, an attracting force, a magnetic force, driving the evolution of the universe. Something has drawn everything into deeper relationships as the universe has deepened, developed, and evolved. We tend to call that something God. And I believe that love is a force of attraction that brings things into those further and deeper relationships. If we look at the evolution of life in the universe, going right back to the first moments, the Big Bang, quantum particles were brought into relationship to form atoms, simple ones like hydrogen and helium at first. But then other relationships formed, other elements came into being. These elements started to interact, be drawn together to form molecules, and a complexity of relationship developed. And so gradually this driving evolutionary force of attraction into relationships formed organic compounds here on Earth, which came together to form simple single-celled organisms, living beings reacting to their environment. But it didn't stop there, of course. Deeper relationships formed, multicellular creatures, things that could reproduce, at first just by copying themselves, but eventually sexual relationships came about. And then love as an attraction between the sexes sort of came out into the open and developed qualities of nurture and care. And the way I see it, divine love has driven forward this ever deeper, more complex relationship structure. Love is the evolutionary force underlying the formation and evolution of the universe. Now, this ties in with the realization in recent years that we're all one, that there is an inherent oneness in the whole created order. I used to be a science teacher before I went into the ministry, and so I retain an interest in the way in which science is moving. And many scientists now see that we live in a holographic universe where everything is interconnected, everything contains a connection to the whole. We're entangled in the web of life. Now, for those spiritually minded, that's no new news, is it? It's echoed in many religious sacred writings. For instance, going back to the Upanishads in the Hindu tradition, the Chandogya Upanishad says, "In the beginning was only one being, one without a second. Out of himself he brought forth the cosmos and entered into everything in it. There is nothing that does not come from him. Of everything he is the inmost self." And in the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament of the Christianity, in Isaiah chapter 45, it said, "I am the one who is. There is nothing else. Beside me, there is no God." And one of the Middle Ages mystics, Hildegard of Bingen, in the 12th century, said, "I am the supreme and fiery force who has kindled all sparks of life. I, the fiery life, blaze in the beauty of the fields, shine in the waters, and burn in the sun, moon, and stars. I bring all things to life. I breathe in them, because I am life." So across all the religious traditions, really, there is this idea that there is life which comes into being, brings things into deeper relationships through love, through this force of attraction. And to my mind, the way of love is to recognize that this is happening, that this is going on, and that each of us is being drawn into greater, deeper relationships. We're being drawn into greater horizontal relationships. We're being drawn into greater vertical relationships with the spiritual realms around us. At a more esoteric level, the wisdom tradition tells us that we as humanity are the throat chakra of the intelligence of this planet. We are an integral part of the creative aspect of this being we call Earth, which many, of course, now call Gaia. An expression of loving intelligence is to hold all others in a compassionate regard. There are so many aspects to this outworking of divine love, but I think growth in compassion for all other beings is an integral part of it. And goodwill held towards all is the outward expression of a compassionate heart. Now I'm going to hand over to Jane Upchurch, who is going to just take this on a little bit further, thinking about Gaia.
Thank you, Don. I want to start picking up on what Don said about the love and connection that's inherent in the evolution of the universe. And I'm going to start with a poem about that. If any of you know Jude Currivan and her book, The Story of Gaia, this is the theme poem for that book, and it's called The Love Song of Cosmos. In the beginning, a breath, so simple, yet perfect. An exhalation of space-time, interwoven with energy and dark energy, matter and dark matter, and early atoms of hydrogen and helium, dancing, singing, cooling. No random bang, but beauty, design, purpose. The weight of the womb-like night birthed early stars, alchemical cauldrons of elements needed for later, fine-tuning and exact matching of resonances to craft carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen, our building blocks of organic life. Then the thermonuclear blast that seeded space with stardust. What power coalesced our planet, held and informed by her own star, Sol, and twinned with our moon, so their dance drives healing tides and future forms. Gaia is not a static sphere, but a flow of magnetic tectonic rocks, feeding oceans, making air, changing and affecting each other in a dynamic interplay of cohesion. And so with the biosphere, myriad beings finding a relationship and balance in self-adjusting ecosystems of innate unity and complete diversity. This is not blind, not accidental. These, we, embody cosmic intelligence, are sentient beings. We are part of each other's past. We affect each other's present. We are Gaians. We can co-create our future together. As Don said, many people now use the term Gaia for the Earth, a term that I really like. And it was coined because it recognizes that all of the different parts within the Earth have got a relationship with other parts and affect each other. And so as a whole, the Earth, the planet, acts like a living organism. But don't forget that this includes us. I have heard many people talk about Gaia as if here's us and there's Gaia. No, we are part of Gaia too. We're all in the same ecosystem. We're all related. So what does it mean to be a Gaian? What does it mean to live within the all-encompassing breath, spirit, heart, mind of cosmos? What does it mean to be so intimately connected to each and every part of Gaia, not just the people? This is what Michael Linfield, president of Meditation Mountain, California, says about on becoming Gaian. What is the difference between living as a human and living as a Gaian? As humans, we go about our lives looking at the world as an external reality, something existing outside of ourselves. As a Gaian, we think, feel, and act within a deeply sensed knowing that the whole Earth lives inside of us and that we live inside the whole Earth. A Gaian is a conscious fractal of the multidimensional ecosystem that constitutes the living planet. A Gaian is a microcosm of Gaia, a sacred space for synthesis, where life meets life and knows itself to be at one with all. A human being lives on the Earth, while a Gaian lives as the Earth. End of quote. This is not just about ensuring that our working relationship with Gaia is compassionate and informed, although that's obviously important. This is about intimacy and belonging. It is about love. To be in a love relationship with Gaia doesn't just help our planet, it changes us. As we notice, greet, thank, help, respect, love any part of Gaia, it feeds the soul of Gaia, which feeds us. A love relationship is not a one-way street. Of course, rocks and plants and waters can't love as humans do, although many animals come close. Francis of Assisi called them his brothers and sisters. But what difference would it make if we honoured the essence of earth, air, fire, and water as shamans do? What difference would it make if we saw the natural world as the indigenous peoples do, not as what, but who? To quote Robin Wall Kimmerer in her book Braiding Sweetgrass, imagine walking through a richly inhabited world of birch people, bear people, rock people, beings we think of and therefore speak of as persons worthy of our respect, of inclusion in a peopled world. Imagine the possibilities. Imagine the access we would have to different perspectives, the things we might see through other eyes, the wisdom that surrounds us. We don't have to figure out everything by ourselves. There are intelligences other than our own, teachers all around us. Imagine how less lonely the world would be. End of quote. We know something of the consciousness of plants and how they respond to our emotions. But think how intimate it is to breathe in their oxygen while they breathe in our carbon dioxide, like lovers sharing their breath. And not just oxygen. As we walk among trees, we are breathing in the phytoncides they produce. I don't know if any of you know about phytoncides, but they are amazing. Plants produce these chemicals that are antibacterial and antifungal. So as we walk among trees, we are breathing in medicine. They have been proved to boost our mood and our immune system. They reduce our blood pressure and stress. They improve our sleep, and they help fight cancer and depression. And even more intimate than sharing our breath with plants is when we eat them, so their bodies become part of our body. Another poem, well, more like poetic writing, Rebreathing. Here I am, alive in my beloved garden, my heart like a sponge soaked in sherry but ready for more. I am witness to the morning. I've lain by its side as it slumbered, and have now come to live in its light. It rolls over me. The darkness is scattered through the garden, gathered in pockets under trees. Twilight, neither dark nor light, neither night nor day, a borderland. This is private time, and the garden and I are one. The morning and I are sisters. God and I are friends. There is silence in the morning, silence and space to find myself, to find the day. The air is moving so gently. It is alive. It is breathing itself in and out of the leaves, in and out of insects, in and out of my lungs. It is carrying messages. It is preparing to carry the sun. It is our invisible envelope of well-being, a space between us and other that separates and allows us to find our own truth, that joins us to other, so we are all one. Right now, it is quietly waiting. The air that I feel on my skin, that I am breathing in and out, this air that feels like mine, marooned in my garden, has come, hoppity-skip, from faraway places. I can be breathing atoms from Iceland, from the ocean, from America. My dog is next to me. I'm rebreathing her breath. I'm rebreathing the breath of my far-flung friends. I'm rebreathing the breath of humanity. I'm rebreathing the breath of Gaia. Many people with no religious or spiritual affiliations say they feel closer to what we might call a sense of the numinous, to what we might call God. They feel closer to that sense when they're out walking in nature. As Don and others were saying, Janice, we are living at a time when we're very aware of the need for humanity to transform, to awaken to their own divine nature, and to live in a context of the unity with all people, all beings, all things, to live with an inner attitude of love. I believe that developing a love relationship with Gaia is a route to this, an integral part of the bigger picture. Love is not just about loving people and God. Love is also about loving Gaia, the rest of Gaia. I've heard artists say that their gifting is not so much in drawing or painting or sculpting. It is in noticing. So this is an invitation to notice, to be aware not just of magnificent trees and birds that sing, but of insects, of the little creatures, of roots and fungi in the soil, of the rich ecosystems that we are part of, and to know that we are in relationship with all of these. They're not other, they're part of us. To learn to live as Gaians. And to finish, all is well. The wayside plants talk to me as I pass, in words of brown and green. Hello, they say. We haven't seen you for a while. Are you okay? I smile and pass on past huge, happy hazel leaves grinning at the sun, and wine-thorn stems of bramble resting from all the pushing and growing and arching with the maternal air and nests of black droops. And the red, round earrings, necklaces, jewelled bodices of hawthorn, which is modestly turning to dappled yellow and brown, so as not to flaunt its pride in such a rich harvest. Elder leaves catch the sun and the spiders and the shape of the day between each leaf as a present to please us as we pass. Nettles lean drunkenly with their stiff tassels of beads, humbly healing the land with a shy smile. And the grass is still singing as it loves the sky and reaches for embrace before it lays itself down, swayed by the gentlest kiss of air. All is waiting. All is round and green and well-fed and happy, for the year has been won. The roots are holding, the fruits are hanging ready for new times after dead winters, and there are no regrets. There is no sorrow for the time that will crumple and blow away leaves and seeds, no fear of bare branches, no awareness of temporary death, just a resting in life, a simple trusting in growth that is part of next season's bloom. Life goes on, all is well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you. Well, we're going to take a break now, but can I invite you maybe during that break, if there are thoughts, comments, questions that you may have, just to jot them down. You could put them in the chat if you want to, because there will be an opportunity later, a sort of plenary session, where we can think about any comments, questions, and thoughts you may have had. So we're going to have a 20-minute break, which will take us to 3:30. So yeah, use that time as well as getting a cuppa or whatever to think of any things that you might want to raise later on in the session. Okay, we'll see you back at 3:30. Thanks. Okay, so we're going to start up again, and we're now going to have Steve Nation, who is going to talk to us about the way of love from the World Goodwill perspective. So I'm just going to mute everybody, then you reopen yourself, Steve. Thanks.
Okay.
Lovely.
Yeah, I finally get the instructions. Oh, look, it's so lovely to be here. What a beautiful, you see a synchronicity of thought, of mind and heart. And whenever you experience this from, for me, this is a new group. I mean, I've been vaguely aware. I live in the States, so I'm vaguely aware. But it's such a joy to see this depth of shared common thought. So thank you so much. I want to join with Chris in just thanking you and all of the CANA team for taking the initiative. And thank you too to Carol Beck who first really raised this problem. Thanks, Carol. So one of the beauties of our time is the growing sense among spiritual seekers of the oneness and wholeness of life. This is what we're sort of experiencing today, I think. Many share a very real sense of being part of one life and one humanity. And this is something, if we think about it in human history, it's fairly new. In ancient traditions, it's been present, but it hasn't been as much consciously part of the conscious intelligence thought as it is today. And that's an incredible thing. This naturally inclusive spirit now reaches widely through the community of thinkers and people of intelligent goodwill, and its evidence, if we ever need it, this is the clearest evidence to me that the path of love is actually in process of deepening in human consciousness. It's pushing itself in to the human. Just think for a moment of that vast group of souls who are to some degree engaging today with ideas of oneness and wholeness, and how this is changing their lives. Thinking about this group as a presence amongst all cultures, all ethnic groups, all faiths. It's so much wider than what we sometimes think of as some fringe New Age community, or even the very widespread something like the mindfulness community. And it represents the core of so much thought today about ecology, about the planet, about the struggle to birth a new world of unity, justice, and peace. And also, as Janice reminded us so sort of poignantly, it's affecting the way we're responding to the shock of this current crisis in Ukraine. In Gaza, but also in Ukraine as well, the sudden emergence of a depth of violence. This is part of the way we're learning to see that and work with that. At the heart of this group of people whose thought is influenced in some way by ideas of wholeness and interdependence, there exists a strong and vibrant core of those for whom the will to tread a way of love has become the central part of their lives, the thing that provides the meaning and purpose of their life, and that reaches into every area of their relationships. Now, for this central group, what in esoteric terms we might think of as the pulsing heart and the central fire at the core of the group of all who love and serve, a place of fire in consciousness. The path of love expands outwards into a will to serve the growth of love in the world, or the will to serve the good of the whole, or what's often referred to in the Alice Bailey works as the will to serve humanity's path towards right human relations. To reflect upon the way of love is to reflect on the source of love within ourselves, each one of us. That's the essence of our being. Don, you spoke so beautifully of this, what we might call the divine self. You know, the Christ within, the soul, the Buddha nature. This will to engage more deeply and consciously in a way of love is all about taking conscious steps, every one of us, to gradually build a bridge between our personal identity and this higher aspect of ourselves, a vertical alignment between the personal and the transpersonal world of soul and of being. Building a bridge into the higher worlds doesn't mean turning our backs on the incarnated world of time and space with all of its intimacies. All it does is it changes our orientation to the world. It changes what we see. It stirs our sense of responsibility, sort of broadens and brings beauty really into our moral imagination, so that we begin to see our human world as a place of service, where we can learn to radiate higher energies of light and love with focus and clarity. In other words, where we can learn to just become more fully human, more into our potential. The way of love is essentially a path of radiation, as we learn to allow the wisdom and love of the soul to flow through all of our personal relationships and into that wide net of relationships that form the real substance of our lives. It's a way of loving detachment, symbolized by the even-armed cross, that's where there's a perfect balance between the vertical arm and the horizontal arm, and where we take our sense of identity and where we stand increasingly at the center, at the point of intersection. And that's where we find something universal flows through this funny little personal identity that each of us has. In a sense, I think that the process of identifying with the radiation of love of the divine self is beautifully expressed in the Goodwill meditation that Chris led us through so powerfully. It begins with a recognition of some of our core relationships in the world. We automatically think of the most immediate primary relationships that are central to every human being on the planet: family, partners, lovers, colleagues, friends, neighbors. But what we don't always consider and give enough attention to is that we're also related to receiving from and contributing to environments of thought and desire and will. That we're part of a physical, emotional, mental, and moral environment of our little neighborhood, of our city, of our community. We're enmeshed in a network of relations with all the subtle, the spiritual, and the material ecologies of these human communities, just as we're enmeshed in the spiritual and material environments of thought in our professional networks, these places where we work and where we spend so much time thinking and then working and contributing to life. We're related to our nation and its history and its path of becoming, of its own dynamic tension between it, the soul of the nation, and its more gritty embodied personality, with all its shadows, as well as its lighted creativity. And we're part of the world of nations, the one humanity, and then this almost new revelation that's come, that you spoke of, Don, a little, and Jane so beautifully. That poem from Jude Caravan really captures so much how we're establishing this new sense of relationship and being part of Gaia, the natural world. And then, of course, I guess many of us on this call, there are there's 80 of us. So we're together, a group of 80 of us right now. And I guess that for many of us, we would also recognize that we're part of and related to intersecting ecologies of the planet. So not only our own Gaia, ourselves, but of planets and constellations in relationship. The way of love, as it's understood from a wide range of esoteric perspectives, not just the Bailey tradition, but many esoteric perspectives, concerns all these intersecting and interdependent relationships, vertical and horizontal. And the more conscious we become of being part of this wide network of relationships, the more we begin to see something of the richness and just the beauty and magnificence of life, of the wholeness of which we're a part, and of the responsibilities which this vision brings. And also, then we have to learn this lesson of being called to live lightly with these responsibilities, to live in a human way, to be able to stand with responsibility, with joy. In this deepening sense of relationship that lies, I think, at the heart of a more, it's this deepening sense of relationship that lies, I think, at the heart of a more esoteric approach to the way of love. Chris also mentioned, and I love this quote, so I want to use it again, how Alice Bailey writes of the need for spiritual workers, that means for all of us on this call, to develop and just take steps, gradual steps, day by day, week by week, as we move forward, to develop a loving intention to fire the entire world with a new idea of the spirit of relationship. And Alice Bailey continues that this needs to begin with one's own self, one's family and immediate group, and then to extend out to this entire, almost infinite world of relationships. Walking on this way requires and ultimately depends upon a deepening sense of self-forgetfulness, an unfolding and ever-maturing ability to identify with a whole and to recognize oneself as part of a global group of fellow human beings who together share a sense of responsibility for the well-being of the whole, recognizing that the whole is in process of transformation, that this transformation lives in us and through us. One of the central ideas presented through many branches of the Ageless Wisdom is this idea of consciousness as a chain of being, a hierarchy of ever-refining and purifying qualities of mind and heart. The continuum or chain of hierarchy stretches from those human beings who are already taking their first steps on a path of love. Think of that. That's an incredible thought. Our humanity, I think 8 billion of us now, and of those 8 billion, a significant number are taking steps in some way or other towards a path of love. So it stretches from those human beings already taking their first steps through to the realm of the soul, what's referred to as the fifth kingdom in nature, where the spirits, ancestors, saints, and great ones of all traditions together constitute the spiritual forces of the planet, where the Christ transcendence stands. This hierarchy of beings is the result of human activity, aspiration, and achievement. For all wise ones who make up the hierarchy have developed their muscles of wisdom, will, purified love, and intelligence through countless human lives. And we are a part of this process, funny little us. Alice Bailey writes of the hierarchy as a synthesis of forces consciously focused on the furtherance of planetary evolution. What you spoke of, Tom. So this expanding sense of relationship that's at the heart of the way of love extends in all directions, outwards towards the world of the human, towards the world of minerals, animals, plants, those gradually changing in color, the leaves of the plants, to the planet itself, and inwards towards the chain of being that reflects the continuum of consciousness, reaching into the mysterious lives of angelic forces, and the spirits even of planets and constellations. And all of this being seen from a perspective of humility and of focus on these big geological timescale processes of transformation that our often blinkered and illusory thought forms, desires, and materialistic orientations need to go through. And yet with a sense that to the extent we attend to the work, to the extent that we care about the work, and that we see our lives, the meaning of our lives in that work. To that extent, our role in the evolution of consciousness at this time is critical and hugely important. And it involves your reference, Don, to this throat chakra of Gaia. We should not, I think, be surprised that as the path of love is deepening for large numbers of human beings, it inevitably evokes resistance and opposition. All the issues that dominate the global conversation in our time, all the concerns, the worries and stresses, the intensity, the trauma and heartbreak of these times express themselves through so many social problems. Alice Bailey wrote extensively about the spiritual and psychological dimension of these problems, emphasizing that they are also the places where the group of servers are most actively working to reorient and transform consciousness, and are laying foundations for future possibilities as the whole collective moves towards some measure of right relations. I don't need to list the problems. We know them, and we can symbolize them at their most intensity with this current exposure to Gaza and Israel. For many sensitive souls, this is an agonizing period. The trauma and chaos of today can so easily be viewed as a world that is completely breaking down, that's unable to renew itself, and hence is producing a depressing and dark view of future possibilities. But it can also be viewed as a world in transition. For as existing structures of belief, identity, and certainties are breaking down, something new, which still hasn't emerged and which may take much time to emerge, is taking shape in consciousness. And this is the causal level of the real change. The esoteric view of the passage from the age of Pisces, with its separation, to the age of Aquarius, with a dominant note of relationship and wholeness, provides a lens for understanding this process of transition. It sometimes seems that we've expected to pass through this transition from one age to another with a minimum of pain and sacrifice. Yet how could such a massive shift in values and consciousness, values and orientation occur to the extent that it breaks through into mass consciousness? How could it happen without pain, suffering, trauma, sacrifice? As the theologian Hans Kung has written, counter-movements and deviant trends inevitably arise to resist, challenge, and test the epoch-making paradigm shift, marking the birthing of a new consciousness. For something entirely new is being born. We don't yet know it, and we shouldn't be surprised that this arouses resistance, and that it acts as something like a litmus test, a stress test for every one of us, calling forth new qualities of discrimination, courage, and will, and providing the absolutely perfect environment for each one of us to develop our own native wisdom, the perfect environment for each one of us as unique beings to deepen our path on the way of love. So these times are deeply meaningful for all of our lives, every one of us on this call, but also for countless others. The esoteric perspective sees this period and the future possibilities it offers in terms of an initiation of the human family in its entirety, as a group, as a kingdom in nature, leading us as a species to take a step forward onto a discipleship path where issues in the lives of individuals and communities become increasingly preoccupied with lessons about detachment, about refining desires into aspirations for an ever-deepening sense of identity and community. This is how we are moving beyond an age of materialism, as material desire ceases to be such a dominant force in directing culture and civilization as it has been for so long, and as the sense of community and mutuality grows, the sense of being part of one humanity and one life is in process of taking a hold of human consciousness, and it's producing an absolutely infinite variety of lifestyles, work environments, ways of being human, art forms, schools, universities. Alice Bailey writes that initiation's not really the curious mixture of self-satisfied attainment, ceremonial and hierarchical recognition as portrayed by major occult groups. It is far more a process of excessively hard work, during which process the initiate becomes what he truly is, what he or she truly is. The transition that the human species is going through is a gritty process because it's human. It requires qualities of persistence, of poise and gentleness, but above all, of labor in the service of humanity. Labor that includes and is accompanied by deep thought, and that requires every single one of us to think these things through for ourselves, to consider as we really ponder what for us is right action in any field of service and throughout our lives. So thank you, friends. I'm sorry I'm a little bit over time.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you for your insights. Beautiful. Thank you. We're going to come into another period of meditation now, based upon this idea of compassion. We're going to look at the Charter for Compassion, which was set up in 2009 with the vision of a transformed world where all life flourishes with compassion. Its mission is to support the emerging global movement of compassion in order to co-create transformation at all levels by connecting and cultivating and encouraging networks of compassionate action. And to that end, the people involved in it have been working in the arts and business and health and social justice and a whole range of human activities to establish compassionate ways of working together in collaboration and cooperation to bring about a better, more compassionate world. And that's what we need in the world now, isn't it? In this last year or so and in this last few weeks. So let us listen now to what the Charter says, first of all, as we ponder on the role of compassion in our world today.
John, can we ask
Yes.
all of the CANA readers to unmute themselves now so that we're
Yes,
ready?
I was just about to say that.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry.
I'm going to share the screen, so if all those who are reading will please unmute themselves now. And we're going to read it meditatively with different voices and a pause between each short sentence. So I shall now share the Charter for Compassion. Oops, let's get the right one. There we are. So the Charter for Compassion. The principle of compassion lies at the heart of all religious, ethical and spiritual traditions, calling us always to treat all others as we wish to be treated ourselves.
Compassion impels us to work tirelessly to alleviate the suffering of our fellow creatures, to dethrone ourselves from the center of our world and to put another there. Brian, this is you. Are you there to do this?
Shall I read it, Jane? Oh,
I'll read it. And to honour the inviolable sanctity of every single human being, treating everybody, without exception, with absolute justice, equity, and respect.
It is also necessary in both public and private life to refrain constantly and empathically from inflicting pain.
To act or speak violently out of spite, chauvinism, or self-interest, to impoverish, exploit, or deny basic rights to anybody, and to incite hatred by denigrating others, even our enemies, is a denial of our common humanity.
We acknowledge that we have failed to live compassionately, that some have even increased the sum of human misery in the name of religion.
We therefore call upon all men and women to restore compassion to the center of morality and religion.
To return to the ancient principle that any interpretation of scripture that breeds violence, hatred, or disdain is illegitimate.
To ensure that youth are given accurate and respectful information about other traditions, religions, and cultures.
To encourage positive appreciation of cultural and religious diversity.
To cultivate an informed empathy with the suffering of all human beings, even those regarded as enemies.
We urgently need to make compassion a clear, luminous, and dynamic force in our polarized world.
Rooted in a principled determination to transcend selfishness, compassion can break down political, dogmatic, ideological, and religious boundaries.
Born of our deep interdependence, compassion is essential to human relationships and to a fulfilled humanity.
It is the path to enlightenment and indispensable to the creation of a just economy and a peaceful global community. So let us now settle. I shall lead us into a few minutes of silence. So take 3 deep breaths. As you sit in an upright posture, if possible, become aware of your body and relax any areas of tension, particularly in the shoulders. And now focus on your emotional body, letting any feelings be calmed and come to stillness. Now the mental body, let go of nagging thoughts or of the business of the day. Focus your mind, bringing your attention to the center of your head, sometimes called the cave in the head or the heart in the head. Imagine there a mystic rose of loving compassion. There, still in bud, but slowly unfurling its sepals, then the petals, until it comes to full bloom and a full, beautiful aroma. And take time to sit with it in stillness now and absorb its joyful beauty. We will sit in the quiet for 5 minutes. Then I shall end with a short chant. Slowly blooms the rose within. 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 Thank you. We come now to your chance to talk to each other, and we're going to go into breakout rooms. And there's some suggested focus questions there, which are: many people talk about love and aim to be loving. What would take this to the next level? And what would the effect be of an increase in world goodwill? And then thirdly, where have you encountered goodwill recently? Now, you may start on one question, you may talk about that for the whole time, you have about 20 minutes, or you may get through all three questions, but either way, there's some questions for you to focus on, and I hope to be able to put those into the chat so that when we go into breakout rooms, I think you can still access the chat to see them. So what would take it to the next level? What would the effect be of an increase in world goodwill? And where have you encountered goodwill recently? Bill is going to put us into breakout rooms, and you should see the invitation on the screen shortly.
Dear, I should.
Right, everybody should be coming back in now. Welcome back. I hope we've had some good discussions. So we're going to open just a kind of general plenary session now for any questions, comments, discussion points, and things which you want to raise. It would be easiest, as there's 2.5 screens worth of us, it'd be easiest if you please use the reactions button, and under the reactions button there's a thing that says raise hand. So if you click on raise hand, hand next to you, and put your little screen in order at the top so we can see who wants to say something or raise a question. So I'm going to go first to Carol Prowse. You need to unmute yourself, Carol.
Hello.
Hello.
Am I there?
Yes, we've got you. We can hear you, Carol.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
we can. Yes. Do you have something to say?
Do I have anything to say? I was surprised there was only a few of us in the group, but it was really very, very interesting to meet the other people, the person who was leading and the other person. Yes, I was quite inspired by that, of what we shared in common, and that we didn't share, that took your mind a bit further on. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Judith, you have your hand up.
I didn't know I had my hand up. Oh dear, I didn't know I had my hand up. So.
You need to unmute, Judith.
Sorry, I'm just unmuting. Yes. We also had a good discussion, and I think what came through for me, we have to treat the causes and the symptoms of the problems in the world, as well as personal transformation. And I would really appreciate it if we could have the charter of compassion, which you read, Don. If you could send it separately so we can actually print it off, that would be really good. And the one for Christians too. I thought that was fascinating.
So
Thank
Bill,
you.
can you do that? Bill can do that, I'm sure.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Yes, the causes and symptoms. Steve and Christine, do you want to make any response to that? Causes and symptoms.
Chris? Well, let me jump in where angels fear to tread. Really, I think that's the essence. All of us thinking through in any particular issue, like in our group, we talked about we tended to talk about relationships and where there's different opinions and where people are trying to convince, one person's trying to convince the other of their own opinions. The causal level, if we think about the causal level, we see everything in terms of a universal significance. And so we see that the way we can best contribute is by healing, not by resolving conflict, by finding a higher point of harmony. And that then can become something that we can, every part of it involves every part of our life, because we also have to heal a relationship in ourselves between our soul and between our conscience and our personality. And that's a field of judgment and of constant sort of interchange and growth. So I haven't answered your question at all well. Now I'll shut up.
Actually, Darcy has put into the chat that the future world order, this is a quote from Alice Bailey, the future world order will be the effective expression of a fusion of the inner spiritual way of life and the outer civilized and cultural way of acting. And I think in many ways, what we're seeing at the moment is the expression of the lower personality nature, which is coming up, and we're experiencing what's often called the burning ground, which is that the hard times have to be gone through in order for the new growth to be able to come through. And at the same time as we've got this burning ground going on in the world, there's new growth, new ideas bursting through all over the place. And those new ideas and new growth, they're going to come to fruition slowly and surely. And the old forms, that's the optimistic me speaking, the old forms will be dying away. Brian, you've got your hand raised. You need to unmute yourself, Brian.
Some time ago, I was thinking around this business of cause and realizing that so much of what we treat is symptoms. And that's after 14 years of treatment by doctors, and realizing that very often they're just treating the symptoms. They have the faintest idea of what's actually going on. But right at the root of our society, I think there is a cause. And for me, what I sort of formulated was that there is only one major source of evil in the world, and that is the dysfunctional human ego. And unless we deal directly with that, then we're not going to solve the other problems, because we'll be treating with symptoms of that. I don't think there are any other issues that are happening in the world today that don't stem from this mistaken identity that we have of ourselves by the billions. And we really need to address that issue. And I think it can be addressed. It's just the basics of psychology. But if we could address it from a spiritual direction as well. And I think somebody said recently that spirituality is only disguised psychology. I think if we could address that directly, then we could solve a lot of problems.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, there's talk within the sort of wisdom traditions of humanity undergoing its first initiation. In other words, that the human consciousness is gradually changing, being lifted to a higher state of being, with energies from outside coming to help that. So that is in a way what helps me to be more positive about the way things are, that things are gradually moving onwards, but it's a long, slow process. Those from World Goodwill will probably be able to say more about it than I can.
So, yes, in general terms, I think it's hugely helpful to think in terms of the whole species, the human species, going through an initiation, and the Gaia itself is becoming a sacred planet. That to me is one of the most, it's a helpful thought, because Gaia is in transition, and that transition of Gaia depends upon the role of this human species initiation. And that gives a way of understanding all of these, this chaotic time. I mean, it seems to be getting more and more, and I believe it will get more and more chaotic. You know, there's a phrase from the Bhagavad Gita, wherever there is a withering of the law, then I arise, something like this. And I believe that's what we're seeing, and it's a very helpful way of seeing it, because using, Brian, your thought about everything as psychology, this idea that through therapy, which is what I believe the human species is going through, and we're all part of that, through therapy, we're dealing with this sort of essence of materialism, of the broken ego, that has the soul in denial, that completely represses any existence of this higher self. And what we're seeing playing out in the world is that, and that's an incredibly useful thing, because it means when I have an interaction with a neighbor, I am involved in that process, the two of us. And if we see that, it doesn't mean anything heavy. It actually means something much more simple, because it means, wow, here I see before me this magnificent process of the planet becoming a sacred planet. And that's what initiation is, and its process. It's not going to see like suddenly I'm not going to change. This character before me is not suddenly going to change, I don't expect. But together we can sort of deepen and widen our sense. Someone else might have.
Thanks, Steve. Yes, Susan has her hand up. Susan, would you like to unmute?
Hello. One of the things I think about when I'm doing my meditation work is process of planetary spiritual evolution that makes me feel hopeful. And the human ego, the materialism, the chaos, it's all part of the process, and it provides a push for goodwill in the world, because people of goodwill, they're all involved in different things, you know. My own part, I work in social care. I'm a social care worker, and I practice person-centered care. Now, I used to do this unconsciously. I didn't know the way I was working was person-centered care. To me, it was common sense until I went to a course in my work, and I couldn't believe I I thought, goodness, I'm doing this, you know. So that was a very pleasant surprise, you know, that I was doing something, you know, that they were calling person-centered care. Anyway, every now and again I promote it to different carers, you know, so say how important it is, you know. So anyway, that's my contribution to the talk.
Thanks, Susan. Thank you very much. Diana, your hand is up.
Have I muted or unmuted?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, super. Thank you. No, I was just thinking very much, well, the last month or two, I've been thinking about what is truth. And what my mind will tell me can be very negative sometimes. And how do I find the truth that God is telling me? You are precious and honored in my sight, and I love you. I will never fail you nor forsake you. I'm always with you. Be strong and of good courage. It's just something that my mind has to tell me, that listen to the truth of what you are hearing. It's sometimes very difficult because, you know, society will tell me something totally different. So just listening to what maybe different parts of the Bible says, Psalm 139, just looking at different Psalms and listening to the truth in these Psalms and what God is actually saying, what God has actually done, what Jesus has actually done. Sorry, I've said enough, but just listening to what that truth is and accepting the truth as I hear it. I don't know. Can someone help me? I mean, our mental health month or mental health period that we've been through. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Dana. I mean, I think there are truths in all the religions.
Yes, yeah.
And there is an underlying sort of wisdom tradition which pops up in different places, in different guises throughout all time. And we have the ability to recognize truth when spoken. Yes. I think we can easily get distracted, we can get deluded, but there are essential truths which I think somehow our soul recognizes and knows, even though sometimes our personality can get led astray. If we can listen to that higher inner self, we can know what the truth is in many situations. Now, that's just my way of thinking about it.
I just hope that that is helpful to make myself think and other people to think and to listen to positiveness. And just the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi. It's beautiful. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. And where there is darkness, joy. And so it goes on. Just, it's a wonderful prayer.
Yeah. Thanks, Diana. Nice to know that you got it there in front of you.
I have got it there in front of me. I have indeed. Yes.
Let's let somebody else have a word. Catherine, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I've appreciated so many of the comments today, and I was reminded of this quote, and I'm probably not going to say it exactly right, but somewhere in the writings it says that at a certain point on the path, the disciple kind of has that sense of not futility, but like is acutely aware of the limitations of their own capabilities and has doubts and questions about, sees the grand scope of how great the work is to be accomplished and what can their tiny, ability do. And I think that really speaks to me, because the world conditions on the outer plane seem so dire, given our great capabilities today, in terms of what we can create and produce and distribute. So anyway, I just kind of was mindful of that, because when I'm present in certain healing situations, when suffering is relieved, or when insights are achieved, or opportunities created where there was a block, you can feel the relief, and that there's collectively a sense that, we're moving in a positive direction, like this is such a good thing, win-win. So I think I just wanted to bring up that little quote from DK, sort of, that we get together in our groups and we don't know what will happen, but the intent really matters. So, yeah.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you. A few others got their hand up. We've only got a limited time, so let's move on. It says on the screen, Boyd7. I don't know quite what your name is, but would you like to go?
Hello. Yeah, it's Wendy. Sorry about that. My name isn't on there.
Thanks, Wendy. Go ahead.
Yeah. All right, I'll try and be quick. Yes, during the break, when I made a cup of tea, it came to me that humanity as the world disciple, it's a bit jargonistic, I know, that's what we say, is like if there was a symbol or something from the Bible, it came to me that it's the prodigal son. Prior to this, we've been saying about what can inspire love, goodwill, optimism, and be inspired about humanity's future. So that was initially a bit of a not depressing thought, but then I remembered that in the story of the prodigal son, he is returning. And in esoteric astrology, we talk about the reversed wheel. The disciple starts to go through the horoscope backwards instead of forwards. And there's a lot of conflict as a result. So conflict isn't necessarily a bad thing. So all I'm trying to say is that it's actually perhaps good that that symbol came to me, because there's the chance everybody, everything, every living thing is redeeming itself and returning to that point of spirit. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy, very much. Bill, you were wanting to say something.
There's an article in the Times today about the cause of war. And one of the great problems is fear of the leaders of what they think the population will think of their behavior, not behavior. The First World War was a crazy war, completely necessary. What was interesting about the article is said that if Austria had ignored the assassination of the future Duke of Austria in Sarajevo, the war would not have started, and that was turn the other cheek, and they couldn't seem to be doing that. Well, I seem to remember Jesus talking about turning the cheek, and I consider it not to be weak but strong to turn the other cheek. And if that happened in the First World War, we wouldn't have had that crazy war.
Interesting point, Bill. Thank you. I think better just have one more, and then I'm going to ask maybe Steve or Chris to have any final comments, and before we go into our final intention. So Judy, you've had your hand up for a while.
I just wanted to respond to Diana. I think it's trusting the inspiration that comes to us is really important, and by trusting we inspire other people. I'll give way to Verena.
Thank you.
Verena, okay, Verena, there was a...
Yeah, I did lower my hand, but yeah. I would just echo that I mean, this is your topic, the way of love. You know, another word for love is God, and if we develop our identity with our divine source, the answers, the truth will come from that place of wisdom. And we're all one. We're all one. There is only one I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Chris, would you like to say just a final word or so, and then we'll hand over to Steve, who's also going to lead us into the final intention at the end. Are you there, Chris?
I don't think Chris is still on the call.
Oh, maybe she's had to go.
Here I am, sorry.
You are there, yeah.
I just wanted to thank you, Don, for inviting World Goodwill, because this whole small group session, all the talks, everything has really brought us together in a sense that we realize that we are really of one mind in many, many ways. And that's so strengthening to, you know, the whole work of World Goodwill. And this, when you asked to speak about World Goodwill, and then the next minute, you know, this war broke out in the Middle East, and you sort of can't help thinking, where is World Goodwill in that context? But of course, the soul is love, but it's the soul that at the time of death sounds a note that brings about death and releases you from the form to the life, you know. And there's a lot of fear of, a lot of identification with the form, the physical life that needs to go. And something like the Middle East problem, if we are going to move into a new era, which we're all working towards, it has to be faced now. And let's hope that we can bring some goodwill, that leaders will get together and try and bring and resolve this issue. Because I think, okay, the Ukraine is important too, but there's something sort of deeply significant about the Middle East, in a sense of moving us forward. And, you know, not all things, there can be a really good reason behind a terrible situation like this. It's always able to bring something good out of it at the end. And there's always that potential, which I suppose is goodwill, that you can bring something about that is better than what it was before. So that's all I wanted to say, and words of great thank you and gratitude for this day.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Steve, a few final words from you, and then if you could lead us into our final intention, which I'll bring up a slide on the screen for that so we can all see it together.
Thank you, Don. And just to echo Chris's sort of gratitude, and in a sense, listening to your comments, your thoughts, Chris, and to all of the comments that everyone's made, there is a sense of, I mean, our work is called World Goodwill, but forget about our work and think that together, think of the number of groups and the sort of the incredible spiritual power of so many people now who are taking responsibility to build world goodwill. You know, it's enormous. I mean, I was thinking of, just imagine at this time when we had, during these past 3 hours, probably there will be another 10, 15, who knows, online conversations of similar depth, of similar deep reflection about really, whatever they call it, about love, about right relationships. And this is a sign of the times. And as you say, Chris, something like having to stand and look in the eye of the crisis in Gaza and Israel and the crisis in Ukraine, and having to look at it in the eye and not turn our backs on it, it's really only through this deepening sense of the soul, the one who chooses life and death, the one who knows the time for the end of the personality, the end of the immersion in time and space, that soul presence, which is the Christ, is taking a step into consciousness. And we, as a huge group of people for whom goodwill is becoming part of our central life purpose, think of all those people are taking a step towards the Christ. And this gesture of coming from the kingdom of soul, from the heart and the head, and coming from mind, heart, emotions, physical, and that is this initiatory process. And that for me does help to see that in spite of the tragedy, something substantial is growing. And in fact, the tragedy means that it's real, because we can't just, it's not some light little ideas about that are nice to talk about. It's something cellular, and it's real, and our lives are a part of it. We have no choice. So let's end with this
just share it now.
Affirmation and mantra, which comes from the Alice Bailey writings. And at the end, sorry, I need to get this back. Yeah, thank you. At the end, if each of us follows this through, and then silently, we use our chant. I will use the Om, 3 Oms silently. We might say 3 Amens. We might use any tradition as a way of involving all these different levels, the higher kingdom, the 5th kingdom, the human kingdom, almost together sounding this affirmation, this mantra. The souls of all are one, and I am one with them. I seek to love, not hate. I seek to serve and not exact due service. I seek to heal, not hurt. Let pain bring due reward of light and love. Let the soul control the outer form and life and all events, and bring to light the love that underlies the happenings of the time. Let vision come and insight. Let the future stand revealed. Let inner union demonstrate, and outer cleavages be gone. Let love prevail. Let all people love. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you all. It's been lovely to share this time with you this afternoon. Thank you, Steve and Chris, for being with us from World Goodwill. And thank you for all those who have come from all over the place, I think, to join us. And it's been lovely to share this time with you. I'm going to get in a little a little advert for what we're doing in CANA. On the 1st of November, we've got our Samhain online sacred space coming up. On the 18th of November, we've got our conscious conversations on interfaith, which is during Interfaith Week. In fact. And on the 25th of November, Janice Dolly is doing a talk for the Contemplative Fire group in the UK. So these are some of the things that we've got coming up, and I think Bill's going to make sure they're all on the website very shortly. So thank you for joining us. Been lovely to be with you, and hope we'll maybe meet or see each other again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.